Are you a parent wondering if you're doing right by your kids?
A therapist looking for real-world applications and working with children and their families?
A teacher trying to navigate educating the whole child in today's world?
Then this is the podcast for you.
Hey guys, it's Bridget
And Jenna.
the teacher.
And the therapist.
Jenna, we're back for episode 2. Are you excited?
I'm so excited.
It was so much fun to record the first one. Thanks everybody for listening and all your feedback.
Yes, definitely. Hopefully that helped with some of the tough kid questions in your life.
It did for me because since last week I got asked, but how did I get in your belly? So I was glad we just did that. I had some answers on hand.
Well, I'm glad you had those top of mind then.
Yeah, it was really convenient.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about today, Jenna?
Well, I thought we would jump into some effective discipline. And really, I think this is going to be kind of your area of expertise, Bridget. I might be asking you a lot.
Yeah, I mean, between being a teacher at school, having kids at home, discipline is a big part of my life. So I'm really excited to talk about it.
Good. So before we jump in, I guess as we jump in, what is discipline?
So discipline really is meant to be an opportunity for you to teach and for your child to be learning something. So the most important thing to know right off the bat is discipline is not punishment. When you are in school, right, when you go to college, your discipline is what you're studying. It's not what's punishing you, even though sometimes you might feel punished. It's actually just what you're learning. So we want to be teaching our children something. It really needs to have an identifiable purpose, right? Why am I giving my child this discipline? But that doesn't mean it doesn't have consequences. It can. Most of the time it does. And there's like lots of different types of consequences too.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. The first type I think we're going to talk about is what we call natural consequences. So what does that mean, Bridget?
Well, natural consequences are just something that happens on their own, right? So a natural consequence is something nobody has to make it happen. It's just going to occur. For example, if you didn't go to sleep at night, you didn't take a nap, you're going to be tired. If you didn't eat your lunch, you're going to be hungry. If you're, running outside in your flip-flops and you fall and skin your knee, that just happens, right? Those are just consequences that kind of tell you, okay, you need to change your behavior without anyone imposing a consequence on you.
Oh, I see. Yes. Actually, I heard a good example of these one time, and it's really stuck with me. The difference between natural and then logical consequences, which I think we're going to go into next. But there was a family, they were visiting the Grand Canyon, and their small child was walking near the edge of the canyon. And the article was talking about how the parents typically like to use natural consequences or, they happen on their own and just kind of use that as a teachable moment. But the child was walking near the edge. And so that would not be an appropriate time for a natural consequence because the natural consequence is falling into the canyon. So instead, the family went in to use logical consequences. Can you tell us a little bit of the difference there, Bridget?
Yeah, so definitely. Sometimes natural consequences are not going to be appropriate, right? Like if your child is going to fall off the Grand Canyon, let's go ahead and step in.
Intervene.
So a logical consequence is, for that example, it would be, okay, now this child needs to hold my hand and they can't walk away from me. Or they need to stay on the inside edge. They're not allowed to go on the outside. Something that makes sense for the situation, but it's imposed by someone else. Typically, the adult in the situation is going to give that consequence. So it's not going to be like, oh, that child who was standing too close to the edge now doesn't get to watch their tablet for the rest of the night.
Okay. It's connected to what happened.
Right. It needs to make sense, be logical for that situation. It kind of just goes to follow along with the actual behavior that we're trying to change.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So do you implement a lot of those like natural and logical consequences in your work?
Yeah. I mean, typically at home, I pretty much go a lot based on natural consequences.
Just what happens.
At school, it's a lot more logical consequence based. I can't necessarily be allowing children at school to fall and scrape their knees. Their parents count on me to keep their kids safe.
Sure.
When it's my kids at home, I can let them have a little bit more of that risky play and learn their own boundaries, things like that. But yeah, I definitely use both of them a lot in my life. What about you? Does that stuff ever come up in the therapist's office?
I'm trying to think. So I don't do a ton of discipline, and limit setting in therapy when you're working with kids it kind of depends. I'm very like child-centered and very non-directive, and so I don't set a ton of limits. Usually when I have a new child that comes in, I say, the only rules here, because I want it to be few rules. I want this to be a place that they do have like a little bit more flexibility. So the only rules here are you can't hurt yourself, you can't hurt other people, and you can't hurt things. So it's totally okay to like build the tower and then knock it over, because we're talking about how to manage our anger and frustration and things like that. But if we're going to be like throwing things at the wall and the toys are breaking, then that's not fair to me. It's not fair to the other kids. But it might be something like I have a sand tray in my office. And so, yeah, if sand gets out of the tray, that happens. But if they are like purposely taking the sand out of the sandbox, then that might be a time like, okay, now we can't play with the sand. So it does come in, but not as often, I don't think, as like in a classroom setting.
Gotcha. But it still definitely comes in. Like if they're spilling that sand, if you continue to spill it, a natural consequence is that it's gone. Or if you purposely spill it, the logical consequence is that you don't get the sand out for them next time.
Then we have to put it away.
Yeah, it definitely comes up.
It does come up a little bit. So this next kind of, I don't know, would you call this like a framework or like something?
I think maybe a theory.
Theory?
Call it.
Okay. This is new to me. So you'll have to tell me, what is the conscious discipline?
So conscious discipline it's one of those big buzz topics right now in the education world, right? And it's very interesting. I encourage everyone to go out and, Google, and there's tons of stuff out there about it. But just for a very brief as you can be, kind of synopsis of it basically is the idea that there's 3 brain function states, and you can be in any one of them at a given time, and it will kind of control or kind of dictate what your actions are going to be. So the first one is what they call the survival state, and that's going to be like your safety needs, your just getting needs met. This state is going to be where you find 90% of our temper tantrums, our meltdowns, our anger, or whatever it is coming from this survival state. So the next brain state that you can be in is going to be the emotional state. That's going to be where your love and connection needs come in, right? We all need to be forming bonds with people and forming those connections, and we have a need for that connection.
Sure.
And this one's important because in order to discipline effectively, we need that connection. And so those connection moments that you can have with your child, those moments that are going to create those stronger bonds, are going to be really important when you go to discipline them. So then the last one is going to be the executive state. And this is where we're going to be able to do our learning, our reasoning, our problem solving. This one is when we're going to be using that prefrontal cortex. Each one of these is associated with an actual part of the brain, but the prefrontal cortex is really the important one because
for learning.
Yeah, and it's when you're born, it's not developed, right?
No, it's not developed till you're 25. Fun fact, fully developed.
Yes, it takes forever, and so when we have these children who are in these emotional states, they don't know how to get to that part of their brain.
Sure, yeah.
So something that's important to remember is that a child 90% of the time is going to be in their survival or emotional state. That's kind of where they live.
Sure.
So you see that child like at the grocery store, right? And they see a toy that they want, and to them as a small child, it's not a want, it's a need. This is something that they need to have. They think it's a need that needs to be met. And so their brain goes into that survival mode. I need this. I must have it. I will do whatever I can to get it, right? So that's when you see the child in the grocery store screaming. Exactly. Yeah. And so there's basically, when they're in that state and they're trying to get that need met, you can't just like logically reason to them and expect them to just calm down.
Oh, okay. Now I understand.
Just like as an adult, if you're having like your anxiety or panic attack or something, someone just telling you, hey, calm down, just not going to be super effective.
Just take a deep breath.
Yes. So we need to get children from their survival states into their executive states, and they need to be taught how to do that. And something important that conscious discipline says is that we as adults have to do that too. It's not just for children, but we as adults have these exact same brain states, right? And so we need to be in our executive state, and we need to figure out how to get there in order to help children get there. Because you can't just survival state to survival state at them, it's not going to, like,
That's not going to be effective.
Yeah, you can't
Everyone's
just, like,
upset.
you have to be the calm to their storm, right?
Yeah.
You can't just, like, tornado back and forth at each other and expect something good to come from that. So you always are going to want to try to be into that survival state or into that executive state.
Yes.
And doing whatever methods you have, right? Like your deep breaths, your counting, whatever it is that you as an adult do to emotionally regulate. And maybe you don't have those techniques. And so then a great place to start is for you to be learning them. And that's where this conscious discipline teaches that stuff too. It teaches adults how to regulate
themselves.
Right. Because how can you teach someone else to do it if you don't know how to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense.
Obviously, it's a big thing for us educators. We have to know how to do it to teach someone else how to do it.
Yeah, you're literally teaching them.
Exactly.
There's so much more that goes into teaching nowadays than I think we as a society thought before, just like math and science and things like that, reading.
Right. So we have all these things that we're teaching kids and also like something that we learned about in school for education, and I'm sure you did for therapy, is that like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so we have to be meeting those basic needs. And that's why you might have children in certain learning environments where when they come to school and they haven't had breakfast and they haven't had a good night's sleep and they haven't had all these things, those schools are automatically going to be kind of those what we consider underperforming schools. But it's because those schools are focusing on meeting their needs.
They're just trying to have them like get breakfast and lunch during the day, and like
they're trying to get them through the survival and through the emotional state. And you can't
teach them anything.
Exactly. You can't just jump to that executive state with a child who doesn't necessarily have the best home life.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's really important to look at these and to pay attention to the different schools and what we might consider like positive achieving schools and underachieving schools, is that typically they're working with a different set of children with a different set of needs.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's important to like take into consideration and to look at. This conscious discipline theory kind of reminds me a little bit of something else I hear a lot about in like, I guess, I don't know, today's day and age, of like gentle parenting. Does that relate at all?
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
So gentle parenting is basically like the philosophical counterpart to like the scientific of conscious discipline.
Got it. Okay. The brain state.
Exactly. It's basically the same thing, but gentle parenting is meant to like, it's for your children to learn empathy, right? You're showing your children empathy and you're trying to teach them empathy as well. That does not mean that this is permissive parenting.
That is something I hear a lot.
Yeah.
It's like, you're a gentle parent. Like, you just like let them get away with whatever,
Right. And sometimes that might be the case if someone is unfamiliar with how to appropriately.
Quote unquote gentle parenting.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
So because you do still need to be having those disciplined moments.
Yeah.
But they are more often those meant to be teaching and learning moments rather than meant to be punishing you for your behavior moments. But so it's not permissive. We still need to have boundaries. We still need to be giving guidelines and things like that. But it's done in like I understand that you're in your survival state right now. You don't say that to the child. You
right.
say, oh, I understand that you really want that toy, but unfortunately, it's not in our budget today, or it wasn't on our list today, or we're going to get something like that maybe for your birthday or whatever. So it's meeting your child where they are. I understand that you're really upset and you wanted that.
Sure,
and kind of, yes, because as we as adults know, right, your emotions just kind of are what they are. You don't always have a lot of control over how you immediately feel, but it's how you act that you can control, right? But as children, they don't know yet.
That is something that I talk a lot about. Like, it is okay to feel angry, because I will have young kids especially say things like, if I ask them that, they're like, no, like, it's not okay. They think it's not okay to be angry. And so that's a big differentiation that I do. It's like, no, it is okay to be angry. It just kind of depends and matters what you do with that anger. Like, we all make mistakes. We all get angry. Like, those are things that I go over in therapy quite a bit with kids. Like, it's okay to get frustrated. It's just not okay to, throw the blocks at your friend then because you're frustrated.
Right. And they don't necessarily know that there's another thing to do with that anger.
Exactly.
So to them, anger is throwing blocks. Yes. And they know it's not okay, but then they don't understand, why can't I control it? Because you don't just naturally know how to control that.
You have to have like an alternative.
Yeah. Something that's interesting to me as far as they don't always know, my son T, he is in occupational therapy for some different things.
Mhm.
And one of the things they work on with him is his like emotional zones, right?
Uh-huh.
And I don't know a ton about it. I know they have their different color zones, and the green zone is supposed to be the one where you're like
You wanna
feeling
be-
good and you're
yeah.
positive.
Mhm.
And so when I try to like do this with him, I'll be like, oh, it seems like you're maybe in the yellow zone or in the red zone right now. And he will immediately be like, no, I'm green. Because he thinks that those other ones are bad. Like even
I'm
those
supposed to be green.
And so he'll like try to deny. He's like, no, I'm not there. I'm not. I'm green. I'm green. I'm green. When it's like, but you're not, and that's
it's
okay.
Yeah.
And so it is hard for kids to really understand, like, I'm allowed to feel my emotions. It's okay for me to feel these things. I think a lot of us grew up maybe not necessarily thinking that we could because, times change. We didn't understand as much back when we were growing up, our parents were growing up, our grandparents, etc.
Right.
And so you were taught more that like emotions are not okay and you don't show them and you just like stiff upper lip kind of thing. And now we're kind of moving away from that and into it's okay to feel things.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's
that those two things were the same thing. Like being angry is the same as hitting your sibling. And like,
right.
So, yeah, of course that's not okay. Like, no,
Right.
that behavior is not okay. But kind of I think we have gotten a little bit better able to like separate the emotion from the behavior.
Yeah.
Like,
so
which one needs fixed or changed or solved. Yeah.
Some of the other parenting types, like we talked about that gentle parenting,
Mhm.
but then they have those like 3 parenting types I think that we've mostly heard about. We talked about the permissive, right?
Right.
And that's going to be like, we're all about the connection with our kids, which is wonderful, beautiful. We want to be connected. But then we don't necessarily have the boundaries.
No boundaries.
They're like the yes parent. You can kind of do whatever you want. We're not going to have a lot of consequences, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And so not necessarily the greatest one that we want. And then we go into the authoritarian parenting, right? And that's going to be the parent who's like the hard line.
Very strict.
Yeah. They don't really care as much about the connection so much as long as you follow the rules.
All the boundaries.
Right. Like I think we all had experience with those types of parents growing up where it was like they're strict, hard line. No, like we don't.
No, there's no
ability. Like, and we don't reason about it. It's just absolutely no because I'm in charge because I said so. That type of parent.
Yeah.
So then the last one is going to be that authoritative, which is different from authoritarian.
I know. Very similar names. They couldn't come up with a different word.
Like, why? I don't know who
Why
named
make
these.
it so similar when it's like, no, do this one, not that one.
Right. So the authoritative is going to be the one that kind of has both.
Okay.
Right. It's going to be
the boundaries and the connection.
Yes. And so in order to effectively discipline, you got to have both. You have to have boundaries and you have to have connections. And so that's going to be the one where we're forming those bonds with our child. We're getting that good relationship, but we're also saying, no, you can't stay up till midnight every day on a school night. We are going to have some
tired.
consequences.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Natural consequences and probably others too.
Right. So like sometimes natural consequences, like a child staying up till midnight, right? Say you have your teenager and they have their phone and you're like, oh, I'm going to stay up till midnight. And then your natural consequences now, like you're tired, but also your parents are being punished because your cranky attitude and your siblings are being punished. And so like sometimes we don't necessarily want to just let those natural consequences. We want to step in, but.
Or if they're going to school the next day, then like we talked about, they're not going to be learning.
Absolutely not. They're not going to.
How old the child is if they're not getting enough sleep. Teenagers need, maybe we'll do a sleep episode. Teenagers need way more sleep than they think that they do. And
yes.
I think we realize. So.
Stop waking your teens up. Let them sleep.
Yeah, seriously. School starts too early.
So true. As a teacher, I agree.
And you teach the younger ones too. High school sometimes start even early.
I know. It's crazy. The little ones are the ones that are usually up early. Like, why don't they?
But they go in at 8 or 9.
At like 9,
whatever time. Yeah. It's
crazy.
Kind of flip-flop.
I don't know who's in charge of schools, but I don't like it.
I think, we did a lot. We went through the kind of different theories and types of parenting and types of discipline. And I think just kind of wrap it all up, like some do's and don'ts, right? Like it can get kind of scientific and kind of heady with all of this.
Yeah. So let's start with don'ts so that we can end with the do's and be positive.
I like that.
Okay. So the number one thing we don't want to do, we don't want to punish out of anger or embarrassment. If you are, like when, say your child's in that screaming state at the grocery store,
Okay.
you're probably going to be feeling angry. You're probably going to be
Embarrassed.
maybe embarrassed
People are
about
looking at me.
exactly. Yeah. And so then that's when you're going to have the parent that kind of lashes out and
Mhm.
you need to stop. Let's whatever. And that's because you're in your survival state too.
Mhm.
And so we don't want to punish from that state. You want all of your consequences to be coming from your executive state, and you're
Mhm.
very able to reasonably give your child a consequence.
Mhm.
So we don't want to start out angry. If you're mad,
Not
don't
the
do
place
it.
to be.
Don't do
Yeah.
it.
Which I think is just so that is right. Like, why would you be punishing if you're not angry, right? Like, you might be. I
Mhm.
think on a basic level, people think that. Well, like, of course I'm angry.
Mhm.
You did something that I'm upset about, and so
Mhm.
that is when I would be disciplining my child, or in the classroom or something.
Mhm.
Yeah, you went against the rules. So yeah, I'm angry or I'm frustrated by it. So I think that's so important, because those emotions are going to be there as
Mhm.
part of it.
Absolutely. You're going to feel it for sure.
Mhm.
And like we said, those feelings are okay for you, just like they are for your
Mhm.
kids. But we need to move from there into a calmer state before we impose our consequence. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think another thing that we were talking about, right? Don't impose consequences that are overly harsh or even just unrelated, unconnected to the, I guess, transgression, if we want to call it that.
Yeah, I don't know what else to call it.
But yeah, so it should be kind of like we were talking about with the logical consequence, or something connected, not overly harsh, not like you're getting your phone taken for 3 months.
Right.
Because the kid's not going to be relating that back to why it was taken in the first place.
Mhm.
And yeah, I don't know. That just seems harsh for maybe, I don't know what the transgression would be.
Yes.
If you were up late on your phone or something.
Well, phones are a big one, I think. I know, Jenna, you have a lot of feelings about
I
phone
do,
consequences for those older kids.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I have talked to a couple of other therapists about this too. So, I mean, I'm not a parent. I'm not a parent of teenagers. So let me know how you all feel about this, listeners, if you do have teenagers in your life. But I'm not a huge proponent of taking the phone as a punishment or as a consequence to our teens and preteens, kids that have them. And here's why. Yes, there's a lot of, maybe negative sides of it, but there's also a lot of positives, and that's how kids use, that's what they use to socialize and connect with their friends and things like that. So,
Mhm.
and I think I come by this opinion because I see it a lot. It's wrapped up a lot in mental health. So I see a lot oh, you're isolating in your room, you're on your phone all the time, I'm going to take your phone.
Mhm.
But that could be a manifestation of they're very depressed. And what are they doing on their phone? Maybe they're reaching out to crisis hotlines that their
Mhm.
therapist suggested.
Mhm.
Maybe they're texting their best friend so that they feel less alone.
Yeah.
And obviously it's not all black and whites. Going back to what we were talking about earlier with sleep and things like that. Yeah, if you're on your phone until midnight or 1 a.m., then yeah, maybe the consequence is the phone gets charged in the kitchen or in mom and dad's room.
What a good logical consequence.
I know, right? Full circle. But just I think that's kind of what we're saying. Don't impose these sweeping overall black or white, then you lose your phone for a month because you
Mhm.
were up late on it one night. I feel like there's maybe more incremental
Yeah,
to
overly
do,
harsh.
and using parental guide, or what's the word I'm looking for? Parental,
Guidance?
guidance, I guess. I don't know, on phones. There's ways, right, that the parents can
Oh, controls and all that.
Yeah, see what sites they're on and things
Mhm.
like that. I'm all for that. But
Oh, yeah. You're not saying don't monitor,
Yeah,
just give them
don't
unrestricted access.
don't monitor their internet for sure.
Oh,
Do that.
yikes.
Do that. But don't just okay, well then you lost your chance, basically.
Yeah, especially because then they don't always know. Okay, when I was a freshman in high school, I had just gotten a phone. Back in my day, you didn't get it till high school, okay? They were new still.
Parents, do you hear this? That was cool.
I got my first
I was
phone.
in kindergarten.
Shut up.
No, I wasn't.
I got my first phone my freshman year of high school, and then immediately within months managed to lose it.
Of course.
Still to this day, don't know what happened. I'm pretty sure
Don't know where it went.
I'm pretty sure I left it on a table, and all I can come up with was that it got thrown away. And
Okay.
let me tell you, I was going through trash cans. I was about to dive in a dumpster. Like, I was like,
Was it like school? You lost it?
it was at
Okay, you
school.
lost
It
it
was
at
that. Okay, listen, I was in speech and debate, right? Woohoo, big winner. Not a college or not a high school nerd at all. But I was at a speech and debate tournament at my school, and I don't know, but I was like, oh my gosh, horribly, like, I'm going to be in so much trouble. I can't
Yeah.
find my phone. And
I just got this.
I know. And so, of
I
course,
screwed it up.
my dad, his logical consequence was, clearly you're not responsible
You're
enough
not
for
ready
a
for a
phone.
phone.
You can't have one.
That's fair, you know.
So he didn't immediately replace it, and he just kind of, and I think, I will say, I think that was a very appropriate response, right? You clearly weren't ready. However, the thing was, I didn't know how to get it back. I didn't know, like, how do I show that now I'm responsible, right? There was no, like, oh, you need to, like, bring your grades up, or you need to do this, that, or the other thing to show me that you're responsible now. And so it was kind of just like, when am I ever going to get it back? Kind of like looming there.
Yeah. As an adult, you can look back and be like, that's logical. Like, you're not responsible. Okay, great. How do I show that I'm responsible? Because now I don't have a phone to keep track of. How else can I be responsible in my life to show, like,
right,
all right, I am ready for another one?
So like, I think 100%, I think that was a good logical consequence.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure, if we're doing things like that, that we give goals for our children to meet in order to get that back.
Yeah, that's a big one that I work on too, because I hear that, like, oh, they haven't had their cell phone for 6 months. And when I hear that, or 1 month or whatever, and when I hear that, I'll say, like, okay, and how are they able to get that back? And I think, like, you know, the parents, guardians, they look at me like, what do you mean?
Yeah, it's like, whenever I feel like
we'll give it back when we want to. Yeah, but that doesn't give the kid a goal. That doesn't, and it's not really teaching that lesson, versus like, okay, yep, it's a lack of responsibility. Like, so you need to maintain these grades, and maybe you need to help out around the house with chores. I can see you're responsible with chores, more with younger siblings, or whatever it would be for the family. Every family's different, right? Or it's like, okay, your phone's being taken, or you're getting this consequence because your grades are poor. Okay, so do I need to bring my grade up to a C before I can get that reward back? Because then that's giving the kid something to, like, work towards too. Why bring my grade up if I'm gonna, you know, if I'm still grounded for the rest of the school year?
Right. What do I care?
Point.
If I lost my phone for being disrespectful, well, I already lost it. So now I can disrespect you forever.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and I think as a parent too, that might feel obvious. Like, I think you're thinking, obviously you need to do
Once
XYZ,
you show
child.
me some respect.
Yeah, but it's not always obvious to your child,
to the kid,
who is still developing their prefrontal cortex, like we talked about. They don't see it the way you see it.
Even our 16 and 17-year-olds.
Yes.
You know?
So you need to be, it's still very specific and laid out with them. This is what you need to do, and communicate that to them.
Yeah.
Like, letting them know what goals they need to meet is very important.
Yeah.
Because you don't just go to work and your boss is like, okay, get your stuff done. And you're like, but what stuff? How do I do it?
Do I need to?
Right. You need to have those expectations to know what to meet. So
definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
In some ways we do, or it depends on the person, does that better with younger kids, right? We have sticker charts and things like that. Or even if you're trying to teach your kids, like if you're potty training or doing something like that, it's like, okay, you get a sticker for this and for this long, and then you get a reward for 1 week for whatever. But we lose that as we get older. But that also brings us to this other don't, Bridget, which again is a new one to me. No clip charts in the classroom.
Okay, so listen.
I was clipping down all the time.
You probably were, Jenna. And let me ask
Talking
you.
Let me
ask you, how did that make you feel when you had to move your clip down?
Yeah, I didn't like it. I remember, I'd have to like walk up to the front. It was usually like on the chalkboard. So I'd have to like walk up there and like clip it into the yellow zone or whatever. So, I mean, I think it quote unquote worked, because then often my transgression was probably talking in class, let's be honest. And so I stopped. But if I'm reflecting now on it, like I probably stopped out of like embarrassment, right? Like I had been caught.
Right. You didn't stop because you learned, talking in class is not appropriate.
Right. And
you stopped because
respectful to my
you were
teacher.
embarrassed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so really what the big no is here is that we don't want to impose consequences with an audience. We don't need other people seeing it happen. Like, yes, it's important to be able to kind of discipline in the moment, but sometimes you really need to consider, is this the right time for my discipline to be effective? And if your child is in front of their peers, it's automatically not going to be effective. All you're doing is embarrassing them.
Yeah.
All you're doing is putting them into their survival state.
Mm-hmm.
And you, like we said, you don't learn in that survival state. You just need to survive. And so what you did when you stopped talking in class was that you learned how to keep yourself out of that. Like,
Right.
you're like, this is what I have to do to survive.
I like shut down. Yeah.
Not this is how I should behave in this environment because this is what we do and yada,
Right.
yada.
And like the reasons why.
Right. Like, I remember when I was a kid, it wasn't clip charts. That wasn't even invented, apparently. But you just had to write your name on the board. And so you literally would have to go up and write your name on the board. And then if you did it again, and mine was always talking too, you'd get a little check mark and then you'd get a little circle. And then you'd miss like 5 minutes of recess, 10 minutes of recess.
Leveled up.
And it was horrible. And your name is just up there on the board in front of all your friends. And like, oh, mortifying. And then, oh, by the way, the one time you could have been talking and getting your energy out at recess, well, you lost it.
Right.
So now
That's a
you
good
just
point,
have to
too.
like still control yourself.
Right.
Oh, we had to stand on the wall, right? And first of all, my school did not even have a playground because woohoo, private schools with no money. So we just had the parking lot. And all you had to do was stand there on the brick wall over top of this black top. It was so hot. It would be horrible. And you just stand on the wall and not be allowed to move or talk for the whole recess.
That almost sounds like a further public consequence. Like, not only did you have to walk up in the classroom and write your name on the board, but then also everyone that was not in your class, but the other grades or the other homerooms or whatever that didn't see that now are seeing that Bridget's standing on the brick wall. So you know what happened. You know why she's there.
Right.
You know?
It's not great. Not to mention, like, taking away that brief outlet of energy and free choice that kids have at school. Taking that away from them is really probably not our best move.
Yeah.
And I know
that's
sometimes
fair.
as teachers, we're like, but that's the one threat that I can do that makes them listen. I get it, but that's the time that they're able to just be for a minute.
Yeah.
They spend the whole day at school having to
Sitting in the chair,
having to follow our rules, having to
quiet.
do all the things.
Yeah.
And so this is the one time, hey, you get to go run outside and be a kid, and I just took it from you.
So now you have 8 hours straight of sitting, and
it's not great. It's probably not our best method. So not a big proponent of clip charts, not a big proponent of taking away recess.
Yeah.
Which might rock a few boats in the education world, but I said what I said.
So educators out there, feel free to reach out to us. Because, I mean, we are honestly, like, tell us we're wrong or explain your side of things too. Because I think, and same thing with me and taking the cell phones for our kids that have those. We want to like have these conversations and things like that. So
especially because if there is a valid reason for it, we'd love to, hey, come back and, this person pointed this out. And that
we're a listener.
We do this every day, but that doesn't mean we're the best at it. Like we're
no.
I was going to say we're not, yes, we are professionals, but we're not experts. There it is. Yeah. So, okay, let's talk about some do's.
Let's end on a good note. So I always say, and I think that this goes along with what you've been saying, Bridget, is like kind of the opposite of we do need to have the consequences be specific, time-based, and logical, and age-appropriate, right? So like your 2-year-old's not really going to understand if you're, I don't even know. I'm trying to think of something. I think that this is a whole other thing of talking about like timeout that we don't need to get into. But I think that that's why the age-old thing, at least when I was growing up, was like the equivalent of minutes per age of the child, right? Because you shouldn't have a 2-year-old sitting and thinking about what they've done for 15 minutes. That's just not appropriate. They're not thinking about that, first of all. If you can even get them to sit still for that long. They really can't, And so, that's why it was like, per age of the child, because a 10-year-old has a little bit more of that ability than a 2-year-old. So
for sure.
Specific time-based, that's like you lost it for 1 week, you lost it for the rest of the night, the whatever that is. Logical, connected, all those things we've talked about.
And time-based can also mean too, like in the moment, right?
Sure.
So when we can discipline in the moment as it's happening, that's really going to be the best time to do it. Because we don't want to say like, oh, you didn't make your bed this morning. Now you don't get dessert after dinner.
Right. It's been 8 hours.
Like what?
I don't remember.
Right.
I don't know what I did at 8 a.m.
And then you have this whole day of, you have one of two options, right? You just spend the whole day pretending everything is fine and we're all normal and everything's happy-go-lucky. But then, you're still in trouble with this consequence at dinner time.
Yeah.
And then it's like whiplash for the kid. Like, wait, we were just fine.
Yeah.
And now I'm in trouble again? Or they're going to spend the whole day going, I'm in trouble. I already got in trouble. I already lost my dessert. And now
Sure.
you're just putting them in that state of being in trouble all day long.
Mhm.
And so we want it to be as close to the time that it's happening as possible
Mhm.
in the moment. There are going to be exceptions to that.
Sure. The group, the audience,
Exactly.
discipline, and then
The two exceptions are definitely going to be the audience,
Yeah.
or if you cannot get yourself to your
a
executive
regulated
state.
Okay. Yeah.
If you're angry, if you're feeling those big emotions, then wait. It's okay to say my discipline is not going to be effective right now because all I want to do is yell at you and spank you or whatever. Because guess what? If you're yelling at your child, if you're spanking your child, I promise you, you're in your survival state. And
Sure.
no, they're not learning.
Yeah.
Because you are not going to be yelling and screaming and hitting in your executive state. So
That's fair.
no, I'm not ready. So yeah, the biggest thing is going to be that we want to be in our executive state when we're giving these specific logical age or developmentally appropriate consequences.
That's a good point, dude. Developmental.
Or even just like child specific, right? Like
Yeah.
I have 2 kids that are the same age, but they still can't get the exact
just
same
different.
consequences just because they're different
They're
children.
different kids.
They respond to different things. They have different needs.
Yeah.
And so you really do need to consider like each child in your classroom, each child in your household. You can't necessarily just have this is the rule, this is the consequence across the board.
And I think that's tough too, right? Because you might also then have the children say, but he blah 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 blah. Yeah. Life's not fair.
Right. That's so helpful, right? To tell a child life's not fair. But here's the thing is that's a good time for us to be able to talk to our children about fairness.
Yeah.
And fairness and equality isn't exactly the same thing.
Right.
It doesn't mean that like you all get the same consequence.
Yeah.
It's you all get the appropriate consequence for you.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
Just like in the classroom, we talk all the time about like different children have their different needs, right? And so it doesn't mean, oh, you all get 2 minutes to take your time test. Sometimes there's a child who needs that 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And it's not fair equal, but it's fair because everyone's getting what they need to be successful, right?
Imagine if like you weren't allowed to wear your glasses in a classroom or something like that.
Right.
Like,
no glasses for anybody.
Right. Well, then that's not fair because you can see and I can't.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So,
it's equal. None of us have glasses, but it's not fair.
It's not fair for us.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's important that we need those fair consequences, actual use of the word fair, meeting the needs, not equality. Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing and I think that we forget about this a lot is we do get down on the child's level. So I think at least me, I'll speak for myself. I think of this a lot with young kids, right? Like they're 3 years old, they're much shorter than you, likely. And so, yeah, like squatting down. And I do see that. I see teachers, I see parents like bending down or squatting down, getting on the floor and talking to their child. And we also want to keep that in mind if your teenager is sitting at the table or sitting in the chair and you're pacing back and forth.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're mad. Again, don't discipline out of anger.
Yeah.
But then that's also an unfair thing, right? Like you have a dad who's 6'5" and he's standing and you're sitting, that's significant.
Right.
You know?
You just intimidated your child into their survival state.
Right. Without even maybe meaning to. You could be the most well-meaning parent. Or even just for that matter, if you happen to be a very tall person, even if you don't have a very young child, but they are just shorter than you, maybe you should sit and they're standing, but the 10-year-old standing and the 6'5" person is sitting. Just to kind of make it more on their level.
It's okay. Like, it's okay for us to be, on the same level. Sometimes I think as the adults, we think, I need the authority. I'm in power. I need to be bigger, better, above. But really what you're trying to do is help your child learn and grow and also gain those same things that you have. And so it's okay. Like, sometimes we can let go of that a little bit. We can let go of that need
Our
to
ego.
be. Yes.
Yeah.
We don't, guess what? You're already older, smarter, better than your kids just by nature.
Right.
Because you've learned more. You don't need to also make it a point to shove it in their face, right? Just giving those equal moments when we can, sitting down and being on their level and just letting them know like, hey, we're in this together, right? Because we are. everyone, every parent, every teacher wants the best for that child. You should, at least.
That's something I bring up in my office a lot. We're all on the same team, right? Because no 15-year-old girl thinks that her parents are on her team.
No, absolutely not.
And a lot of my teenage clients don't want to be in my office either. So it's like, but we are all, and we might be saying it in a different way, but we're all on the same team. Kiddo, me, parents.
Yes. And teachers as well, too, in the classroom. On the same team, for sure. And that's why it's important to, like, make sure that we are communicating well, either as co-parents. Parents need to communicate with each other, or like Jenna, if you have therapy with the child, it's good to communicate with the parents. Teachers. Yep, exactly.
Yeah. I love communicating with, if I, have a release to speak with the school or to speak with, doctors, things like that. Because I just, again, like, so that we can operate as a team. How is this showing up for the child at school, at home? Because 9 times out of 10, these kids come in here perfect angels in my office. They clean up without being asked. They're, yes, Miss Jenna. No, Miss Jenna. They're so polite.
Okay, can you move to my house and do that to my kids?
They think that, right? Parents say that, and they're like, I swear he's, I believe you. I believe you that he does not act like this at home, at school, at the grocery store, And so it's helpful, right, obviously, to have that whole picture, because I believe you, but it's also like, what's going to help in that moment, because they probably don't have stressors, their triggers for 50 minutes a week in my office where they get to have fun. And,
And for sure, from the teacher perspective, too, it can be really helpful for parents to let us know when their child is going through therapy for whatever reason or is. Okay. And if the parent is willing, allowing the teacher and the therapist to communicate,
collaborate,
can be very helpful, because then I know how to help meet this child's needs better.
Yeah.
And I know what they're working on in therapy, and I know how to help them. And then transversely, I can say to the therapist, this is what he's really struggling with, or this is what she really struggled with in the classroom this week.
Yeah.
Maybe you could touch on that in your sessions. And so that communication can be super helpful for a child of any age.
Yeah.
Especially like as you get into high school, it can be very helpful, because then the teachers know what's going on with a child in therapy or outside, or even if your child's not in therapy, if there's something going on with your child that is going to affect them in their day-to-day classroom life, it can be great to give that teacher a heads up. Just like, hey, you don't have to get into specifics.
Yeah.
You don't have to get into any of that. But if you let me know as the teacher that your child is going to be maybe extra tired, extra emotional, whatever it is, that gives me a chance to meet their needs better.
Yeah. I saw something, I think I saw it online, I don't know. I'm not sure how old or what age the teacher was teaching, but she said at the beginning of the year, she sent on this paper and like it almost looks like a little hall pass, but it says handle with care.
Oh, yeah.
And it explains like, if there's something going on at home, or there was a death in the family, or maybe parents are getting divorced. Again, you don't need to write me a whole big long essay, but if you just send that to school, I think the idea was like send it to school with the child that day, then the teacher knows, okay, something's going on for this kid. Maybe I don't know exactly what, but they might be more tired. They might be more emotional. They might be quicker to anger, quicker to, cry and become upset like that. And so that makes sense, that I think that would be helpful to know.
And as a teacher, when we have, 15, 20, however many kids are in your classroom, it can be a lot for us to kind of just like get through the day and keeping everyone on task and things like that. And so we try our best, I promise we do, but we don't always pick up on all those little things
subtle
in
signs.
Each individual child. And so having those moments of the parents communicating with us that, hey, something's going on or whatever it is, can be very helpful in us to meet the needs of that child.
Yeah.
Because as hard as we try, when we have 20 kids in the room, we don't always see this person looks slightly sadder today. We don't always see it.
Yeah.
So
much as you try.
Yeah. So letting the teacher know can be super helpful.
Top of mind. Oh, okay. Hey, Jenna's mom came in today or said this. Let me know. Shoot me an email.
And this is really important as kids get older. We find that with the younger kids, parents are much more inclined to communicate.
That makes sense. I mean,
but your middle schooler and your high schooler, it can still be very beneficial for you to be in contact with their teachers. It might not have to be as much, whatever, but like things like going to
Yeah.
those parent-teacher
I
conferences.
was going to say that. I was going to use this as an
Yes.
example. I think
That-
my high school teachers, they just sat there for the most part because very rarely did parents and guardians come, or they came because something was wrong.
Right.
They're
Right.
failing math class. Math teacher, why? You know? But hey, if you would have come in September, maybe they wouldn't be failing math.
Right.
Not blaming anyone. Just saying, like, if we could work collaboratively, then, like, yeah, maybe we would have known it sooner, caught it sooner, been able to help the child.
For sure. I mean, I have the 5-year-olds, right? And so those are we're all about it. We put conference signups out, and they are full within the hour sometimes. But
like
then
first classroom, second classroom, their parents are there.
And so but then you look at the high school ones and the middle school ones, and it's like 2 people. And we gotta get out of the idea of, well, they're older, they don't need me. Like, yes, they do. They
might not think they do, but they do.
Yeah. And that's not saying you don't need. I mean, of course, this is when we're learning responsibility, we're learning independence. You can be giving your child those things, but still be meeting with their teachers and giving them that extra benefit while you can, because there will come a point where you kind of have to stop. But while we can, let's do it. Let's be there for our kids.
Yeah, probably
all the
show
time.
Up to office hours at college, right? So, maybe
you imagine, like,
I'd be mortified
if your mom just emailed your college professor, Jenna had a really hard night last night. Oh my gosh.
There's this one final do, Bridget, and I'd love to hear about this from your perspective. When possible, maintaining physical contact. What does that look like?
Yes. So first of all, let me be clear. That does not mean spanking your child.
Yeah.
I mean physical contact, touch, a hug, something like that. Something that we as humans just need, right, is that physical touch. We need to be forming those connections through touch, through holding hands, through hugging, right? That's why when you are with your spouse, you express your love that way, or with your children. And so it can be very important to be having those connections, holding your child's hand while you're having this conversation. Or if it's a small child, I'm a big proponent of like sitting down and pulling them to your lap and kind of holding them as you discuss.
As you're talking.
Or squatting down to their level, and you can kind of hold both their hands and look at their face and be truly in that moment with them, calmly explaining to them what's happening and helping them understand.
Yeah.
Because again, what we're trying to have a purpose here. We're trying to teach them something.
Yeah.
And we're not trying to teach them, I'm the boss, you do what I say. We're trying to teach them how to, because guess what? One day they're not going to have you there to be their boss, but they still need to know how to do these
How
things.
to do it on their own.
So we're literally trying to teach them to human, right? And so let's make sure we're giving them those tools, and touch can be forming those connections, because you cannot discipline without connection. The biggest thing to take away from all of this, I think, is that in order to effectively discipline, you need boundaries and you need connection. And if you don't have both, it's not effective. So yes, those moments of touching your child, hugging your child. If it's an older teenager, maybe you're not holding them in your lap, but maybe after the conversation, you give them a hug. That can be very important.
Sure.
Or another great way to form those connections too is, because let's be honest, none of us are perfect. You're going to get mad and yell at your kid, right? And recognizing that and apologizing to your child.
Sure, making that repair.
Yes.
Because you're modeling to them too.
Yes. Like, I know growing up, my dad was wonderful about apologizing. Still to this day. If he gets angry or whatever, he
will own up
show
to it. Yeah.
And it has been so easy for me to do that for my children, because it was modeled for me so well growing up. Because all the time, would my dad yell at me when he was angry? Sure. I mean, listen, I probably deserved it. I don't know. But then he would say, I'm sorry, and whatever. And so now when I do something wrong towards my kids, it's very easy for me to say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I did that. Mommy was angry and I shouldn't have spoken to you that way. You know, you don't deserve to be spoken to that way, whatever. And kind of giving them that it's okay to make mistakes too.
Right.
Even I make mistakes.
It's okay to own up to it. And it's not okay for someone to speak to you this way. I think that's an important lesson in and of itself, you know?
That it's okay.
Because they, quote, love me.
Right. Then you get into a whole other aspect of, this person who loves me is allowed to treat me horribly.
Badly. And then love me and hug me, and then it's fine.
Yeah. So. No, we definitely need to be sincere in our apologies to our children when we do mess up. And because again, you're forming those connections. And you can't have discipline without those connections.
Yeah. I love that. Boundaries and connections. I think that's a great way, a great note to end on.
Yeah.
We need boundaries and connection.
Yes. So, I think that's about all we have to say on discipline.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, everybody.
For sure. Send us your ideas, teacher and therapist pod on Instagram or teacherandtherapistpod@gmail.com. So
yeah,
genuinely, if you have other opinions, if you have other things that you've found worked for you and for your family.
Oh, yes. Please give us more ideas.
Yeah. I'd love it.
Absolutely. And please feel free to tell Jenna why she's wrong for saying don't take your kids' cell phones away.
Or teachers, educators, why Bridget's wrong in saying don't do clip charts.
Yep.
All right. Well, we will talk to you all next week.
All right. See you next time.
Bye.